Welcome to High Notes, conversations on the art and business of voice. High Notes. Make sure you never miss a video on our channel by pressing that subscribe button, and if you like this episode, please do give it a like and leave us a comment below. Now, let's meet this month's guest. Today we share an inspiring conversation with Merlin Crossingham, Creative Director for Wallace and Gromit at Aardman Animations, based right here in Bristol. Merlin takes us behind the scenes of some of Britain's most beloved animated characters, offering insights into the craft of voice performance, the timeless charm of stop-motion animation, and the delicate art of keeping iconic characters like Wallace and Gromit both fresh and true to their roots after decades in the spotlight. From animation lovers to aspiring voice actors to lifelong Wallace and Gromit fans, if you appreciate the craft of storytelling in all its forms, then this is for you. Merlin, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to be talking to you. I want to go right back to the beginning, if I may. Is there anything from your childhood or younger days that you think may have informed your current role as creative director for Wallace and Gromit at Aardman?
There is actually. My late mother was one of the founders of a school for circus skills and performing arts here in Bristol. And she wasn't a performer herself. She helped one of her best friends who was. She was one of the administrative sort of trustees and chairs of, it was called Full Time back then. I believe it's called Circo Media these days. But I was a teenager at the time, and I used to hang out there, and I did a lot of performing, acrobatics, balance things, tight wire, trapeze, unicycling, that kind of thing. And on occasion, did a chance to do support performances with things like the Moscow State Circus when they visited town. So I did have some performing experience, and a very physical performing experience as well. And then later on in my teens, and when I decided that I wanted to be an animator and work in animation, I became a climbing instructor to finance film school, and all of those physical things really informed me as an animator. Is all about understanding the physical shapes that the body needs to make and putting that into the character. So right back when I didn't want to be a director necessarily, I was very focused on being a character animator, and that as a launch point for understanding performance and being a performer who performs through a puppet was, I think, key to my professional understandings later on in life.
That is absolutely fascinating. I wasn't expecting that answer, but when you just told me that, it makes complete sense. Wallace and Gromit are global British icons. They're certainly weaved into the fabric of my childhood memories. What do you think gives these characters such long-lasting emotional appeal? They've been around such a long time, and how much of that comes down to the voice and performance?
So Nick Park created Wallace and Gromit as his graduation film from the National School of Film and Television. And it was a long process for him. So it wasn't something that happened overnight. And I think it was 1989 when A Grand Day Out was first unleashed on the world. And at that point, I think it took Nick 7 years. With regards to the voice, with Wallace, he always had Peter Sallis in mind. And he wrote to Peter Sallis, and Peter Sallis just said yes. And Nick tells the story that Peter just read the script, did a demo tape, and said, I think he should. And Peter was a very rather Southern Counties natural accent, so his northern accent was put on. And so he sent Nick a cassette of what he thought Wallace might sound like, and that is the voice that Wallace has. With Gromit, Nick always thought Gromit would have a voice, and actually recorded a voice for Gromit. But on the first shot that he animated with Gromit, he physically couldn't get to the mouth. And so instead of animating the mouth, he just animated the eyebrows. And this is, I think, the thing that Nick struck gold on, is he then realized that Gromit's physical performance could say everything he needed, and his eyes and his brow and his body language. So Gromit's voice is his physical performance and the context of the film in which he sits. For Wallace, it's now voiced by Ben Whitehead, a brilliant, it is a caricature of a northern accent, I mean, it is real, but it's our interpretation of a comedy northern accent. And so that combined with Wallace and Gromit's relationship, really, that's at the heart of everything as characters. And as a sort of a duo, you can put them in all these different stories, and that's their strength. And the thing about their relationship is that so many people see something of themselves in a different way, whether it's husband and wife, whether it's lifelong partners, whether it's colleagues, whether it's people, just dog owners. On so many levels, they kind of work. And Nick struck gold, really.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you unpick it all. I'm glad you brought up the point that Gromit doesn't speak at all, because he is one of the most expressive characters in animation. I'm interested, what can voice actors learn from that kind of silent storytelling?
I think the key thing is that for voice actors who have done only screen work, is to remember that on screen it's your eyes that do the work. And I find that performers who have had radio experience that understand that they really need to pull a hat down over their eyes and listen to themselves. But being physical is really important, as you said earlier, when you do a vocal performance. But to remember that in animation anyway, the voice is a springboard for the physical performance. And as directors and as animators, we won't use their physical performance or use their vocal muscles to inform what we do. And that's one of the tricky parts for a voice artist, I think, especially in animation, because it's quite an esoteric experience for them, because at the point we do the voice recording, 99 times out of 100, it's before any animation has been done. So we're having to go, no, honest, it's gonna be all right. But imagine this, that, and the other. And in an animated world, that can be really quite peculiar sometimes.
I just want to pick up on a couple of things there. I've worked in radio a very long time, and I always think I couldn't do the job I do now if I didn't have that broadcast 101 training experience. Acting for the microphone is another thing I wanted to pick up on, which when we coach here at Brava, we have to explain to screen actors, etc., that acting for the microphone is a completely different skill set. It's still acting, understanding the importance of physicality and all the things we've already talked about in the 10 minutes that we've been talking. So really fascinating to hear you pick up on those things. You've worked across characters with wildly different vocal styles, like Wallace, Morph, and the Creature Comforts cast. Creature Comforts, for me, still transports me right back to being maybe 11 years old. So clever, just so clever. What makes a voice performance feel right for stop motion characters?
Yeah. With Creature Comforts, they are real people. They're not performers. So they're people off the street. And our researchers spend a long time looking for people with something interesting to say who also sound interesting. And that's a huge process. And they record hours and hours of interviews, of which we pick sort of probably 2 or 3%, because it's not scripted. We ask leading questions and see what they say. And the thing with that is that with Creature Comforts in particular, it's a social comment on society. And so you want people to say things that hopefully reflect in whatever the episode is about, in a way that is amusing and unguarded, so that it feels honest. And I think that as an interviewee, easy, because you're just being yourself. But when you take that into being a performer, something in that, especially in animation, there is a tendency to do funny voices or silly voices. And personally, as a director, I'm not after that. I'm after a character that I believe that doesn't sound like someone putting on a silly voice. It sounds like a genuine person that just is a bit, quirky, or has a uniqueness that makes you go, "Ooh, hang on, what's that?" And I don't want them to be kind of hammy, really. Even though, Wallace is essentially quite a hammy performance, the character is honest and genuine. And I think it's a really difficult thing it's a very easy line to cross.
We were talking to Pixar recently, and we were having a very similar conversation. And I was sort of explaining, when we train voice actors here, it's very easy to read someone else's words, but actually conveying the truth behind it is all about intention, really. And like you say, it is a very fine balance between getting something truthful and meaningful that connects with an audience, and then just something, like you said, that's hammy. So, and that often will come down to the director, won't it? Putting the actor into a very safe space. Yeah, fascinating. When you're casting a voice actor for a new animated project, what do you listen for? What separates a good voice from a great one, or the right decision or the wrong decision?
Gosh, I'm not even sure you can quantify it.
Right.
I think it comes down to a hunch or just a personal preference. It also depends how you cast it. Sometimes if it's a small part, you'll just do it off a demo tape. If it's a larger role, we'll do an audition and that kind of thing. And if it's a larger audition for a bigger part, sometimes it comes down to how you feel working with the person. And you just think, yeah, we can get somewhere with this. It's not there now, but we can get somewhere with it. We can rehearse, if you like, and develop a character. Other times you just go, that's it, right there. We've got it.
It's great when that happens, right?
It is really good when that happens, because it doesn't happen hugely often, but and sometimes it's when you go, oh yeah, and then you're surprised. And if you're surprised by something, oh, I wasn't expecting that. That's like totally left field, but it's amazing. Then that's really worth listening to as well. And those are the things that a performer can bring, which you don't. You write down a whole list of things you want from your character. That's where the power of the artist comes in, really. Where as a director, I will have been working or had this in my head for weeks, months, even years. And so I think I know exactly what I want. But if someone comes in and just gives me a light bulb moment, then that's worth its weight in gold in itself.
Yeah, we talk a lot about nerves and the fear. When we're training people, we say, look, you have to understand how to put that aside, how to deal with them, so that when you go in front of a director like yourself, and I expect voice actors will be incredibly nervous if it's the first time they've worked with you, perhaps, but also, you know, to understand that you've done the work and that you can play, that you can be free enough to play in front of a director. I think that's so important, and that you don't get afflicted by nerves.
It is, because otherwise we're not getting a chance to see any of your potential. And it is raw for us. It's raw. It's nerve-wracking for us as well, because there's such a lot. Equally, in a person auditioning for a part, there's a lot riding on it. For us, there is as well. It's a different kind of pressure, but yes, it's, if you can unlock yourself from that constraint, that, for me, that's where the interesting things, and it doesn't need to result in your most epic performance. I don't think. It just allows me to see you a little bit, and I think that's kind of more important.
Definitely. It brings up the importance of craft. That's something that actors often don't realize before they start training, which is, we always pitch it like this: you learn, and it's messy in your training. That's where you learn how to stretch yourself and explore all your character work, so that you have a book of characters you can draw on, or mix up, or fuse three of them when you go in front of directors. And I think that's the difference between masters of their craft and just picking up a script and reading someone else's words. You mentioned earlier on that casting Ben Whitehead, who eventually took over the voice of Wallace from Peter Sallis. How did that happen? How did you find him?
It was a happy accident many years ago on Wallace and Gromit Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which I was an animator and second unit director on, so I wasn't involved in the casting myself at that point in the Wallace and Gromit genesis. But Nick Park and Steve Box were directing, and they needed a read-in artist in pre-production. And a friend of Ben's was at the session, and one of the artists was taken ill and couldn't turn up, and she said, hang on, I'll call someone. It was in the very early days of mobile phones, and Ben luckily had a mobile phone, and he was on the verge of giving up acting, I believe, as I might have got that wrong, but anyway, she calls him. He was on, having a break, heading down to Cornwall. He said, I'm turning round, I'll be in Bristol I think he was in Exeter, I'll be there in an hour and a half or whatever. And so he turned up, and this was to read in for Ralph Fiennes' character. And so they did the read-in with that, and then they were going to do another bit, and they said, oh, would you mind staying on, and we've got some Wallace lines we'd like to do. And Ben said, oh, could I just try and do it in character? And they went, yeah, well, whatever. And so he did it, and it was like one of those pin drop moments where everyone went, oh my God, that's quite amazing. And so from that point on, that didn't result in Ben getting work as Wallace's voice, but what it did do is mean that then after the film, when things like computer games and sat navs and things like that came up, Peter was the voice of Wallace and was asked if he'd like to do it. And then Ben became an understudy and picked up the jobs that Peter either couldn't or didn't want to do. And I worked with Ben then as I moved into directing Wallace and Gromit and became the creative director of Wallace and Gromit, working with Ben on those, I suppose, not the headline projects. And it was a great proving ground for him. And over the years, then when Peter had to retire from working and Ben took on the mantle, then it was a case of Ben, and a bit like you were saying, just realizing that it was not him trying to copy Peter because they're two different artists. He does a great mimic, but actually the epiphany for Ben was realizing that actually we valued his talents as a performer. And he's been interviewed and talked about it on Vengeance Most Foul, really stepping up to do a feature film. He had to remember that again, that we, as a performer, we trust him and we wanted him just to sometimes not worry. Well, Wallace isn't his natural voice, but sometimes just learning to forget that is more important and trust your instincts as an artist to let a bit of Ben come through, because otherwise we don't get the emotion. We don't. Yeah, if you try and mimic too hard, it can neutralize performance.
Yeah. First of all, there must have been some planetary alignment happening there for Ben.
I know.
I love listening to those success stories and those positive stories when a voice actor bags a gig like that. And I would imagine now that you all have this wonderful relationship because you get the benefit of working together so much over a long period of time.
Yeah, it has now been, I might even say decades, maybe not quite, more than 10 years for sure. Yes, it's a sort of I'm quite pleased that we've developed I feel it's a trusting relationship. We can be open. I can say, Ben, you need a break. You've lost your Wallace. And he goes, oh yeah, I'll just go outside or something, or whatever he does to reset and come back in again. And that's really good for us because, or he's very happy to say, oh, I just need a minute, or I feel I can do that better. And I think that's really important for an artist to feel, again, if you're new to voice acting, is to say, no, I can do that better. Don't just, if you weren't happy, is to say that to whoever's directing you.
Yeah, really good words of advice. How do you direct voice actors differently for stop motion, where subtle timing and physicality are key?
I've not directed voice artists for anything else, so I don't know what's different about the way we do it. So when we record for animation, we rarely do multiple voices. It's usually solo. So the director or an engineer will do the read-in for if there's a back and forth of lines. And really it comes down to explaining it. Sometimes we'll have storyboards at that point. So quite often when we're recording the voice artists, we will already have the film in quite a tight shape in terms of our edit. And in order to get that edit, we will use scratch dialogue, which in the case of Vengeance Most Foul was Nick Park, myself, the editor, the production assistant, whoever's happy to sit in front of a microphone and do a read of the lines for timing, for edit, and a little bit for performance. And the danger with that is that we as directors get to the performance, whether it was good, bad, or ugly, you get so used to it that you need to divorce yourself from that a little bit. So we can use the animatic to show an impossible physical situation that might happen in animation, so the artist can watch it and go, oh, I see, I'm hanging onto a car which is being driven by gnomes and I'm going down the road at 100 miles an hour, and so they figure out, they can see the amplitude of the situation. Or it might be that I get up and attempt to act it out in a physical way to show them, and it could be any combination of the two. Sometimes if you're in a small recording studio, that's not feasible, but so I don't think there's one answer to it, but it's you as the director, it's your duty to try and get it into their heads, paint a picture for them to understand. And it's really important, if the artist doesn't understand it, that they don't try and find it without you. They need to say, no, I don't, you got it. Can you work a bit harder on that?
Yeah, and all that's coming into my head now is that background at Circa Media, the original version of that, and all of those
Yeah,
acrobatics that you were doing. So it makes
yeah.
complete sense. What's your approach when directing actors who are new to animation? Are there common habits you help them unlearn or refine? Because we know that new actors can come in with lots of bad habits.
Yeah. I think the most common one is they'll read the line and go, and actually the thing to do is to play with the line, is to do it maybe do it 3 times, do it over, read it through, say, I'll do it 3 times and go, and I might say to someone who I know is new, have a crack at it, do kind of half a dozen, play with it, basically. Go start light, work harder, dig into it. And partly it's because no matter how much someone has read or tried to learn the lines, and you don't have to learn the lines when you're doing animation because you've got the script right in front of you, it's to kind of try and make it, in repeating the line, they sort of forget the line and try and embody it somehow, and then I can start talking with them and discussing subtleties. And even if, say, we're going for a light read on something, just doing it 3 times. Oh, hi, Wallace. Oh, hi, Wallace. Oh, hi, Wallace. Just says that they're freeing themselves up to play without doing one, losing the moment. And I think that's one of the great things about animation is we've got plenty of time. There's no hurry. You can afford to find it, basically.
Yeah. We often talk about getting under the skin of the text and the character. And it's quite an amazing thing when you are privileged enough to have someone approach you for training from the beginning. And as they go through the various parts of VO, they get to characters. And we have so many individuals who quite at the beginning say, I don't want to do character work. And I'll always say to them, okay, great, just wait. Let's just go step by step. And to see those individuals coming through and then just quietly dip their toe into it and to watch them grow in confidence is quite something. And you can only understand what it means to say play if you commit to character work. You don't end up having to do character work, but we argue that there's character work across all of the spectrum of VO, commercial, narration, and
I was going to
video
say
games.
that, yeah. So I was going to ask, what is that when they say character work? They mean that because they want to do voiceovers or product taglines or the straighter kind of their own voice, if you like.
A lot of people will come to us and say, I just want to do narration, or I just want to do commercial, or I just want to do video games. And our response is always, okay, but let's have a discussion. As a voice actor, you have no idea what you are going to book. I can say that from experience. The one thing that you say, I don't do, is usually the one thing you get a booking for. And that's happened to me in the past so many times. And as a voice actor, we have to be free to say, yeah, why not? Let's give it a go. And that's why training's important. So you have the confidence to say, well, I'll give it a go. And so I love hearing you say that about the freedom for expression and play. And the voice actor has to take control of the craft and not, you don't want to say to every actor, you can do this line 3 times every time. They have to do it naturally.
I've just realized that when I said I hadn't directed for anything other than stop motion, I was completely wrong with my own career, because I've done voice records for augmented reality, sat nav, computer games, VR games.
I've got all those questions lined up.
Documentary. And I have to say that all of them, if there's no character in the voice, are not interesting to listen to. So I think regardless, you have to have characters. I know it's not character like a character in a film, but if you're narrating, you're the character.
Yeah. But if you think about it logically, we always say to people, you play different characters all day, answering the door to the postman, dropping the kids off to school, going to the doctors. We don't speak in the same way. So we all have these different character voices. So yeah, we get really deep and we love it. And it's so great to hear that from you. So I have to ask you, you've done voice work yourself. You are the voice of
Yes.
Wolf and Chaz. Has that
And Chaz, yeah.
experience changed how you approach directing others? And did you learn on the job or get training, or is it just something that you did naturally?
So that came about because I was directing the resurrection of Morph as a character. He'd had a fallow period for a decade or so, and I think in 2014 I was directing the series, And as I said before, we do scratch dialogue to get the edit working, and I'd done that. And Pete Lord, the creator of Morph, and I, as the director, decided that my performance was just right, and so I cast myself. But with the blessing of Peter Lord, who was is the owner of Morph and the creator of Morph, I wasn't in a position to make that call totally on myself, about myself. But so Morph is the anomaly. So back in the day, in the 70s, when Morph was first made, Peter Lord and David Sproxton, the founders of Aardman, would animate Morph. They would edit the footage on 16mm film as a silent film and send it off to the BBC in London to have sound put on it. And the sound engineer in London, and I've forgotten his name. Anyway, he did all the voices. And he had no idea what Morph and Chaz were supposed to be saying, and it was nonsense speak anyway, because Morph was created for Vision On, for deaf children.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he was always intended to have a physical performance, and for his voice to be nonsense, so that the hearing audience had something to hear.
Wow, I grew up with Morph, and I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then he sort of evolved into Take Heart and with Tony Hart and all of that kind of thing, where the voice did have more relevance to the show, but originally he was intended. So with Morph, now we still do Morph in the same way, just because it's the way it's always been done, is that we do the animation and then I put the vocals down, and I do it I try and do it in 1 or 2 takes live, as a live performance, because that was the way it was always done. So it doesn't have to be in sync. It just has to have the right intention. And also, in order to get Morph's high-pitched, squeaky voice, it's recorded at half speed and then played back at real speed. So in effect, it's double speed of my voice. So I record Morph by going, and then you when it comes out, because you can't physically speak fast enough.
Yeah, it's really fascinating for us to listen to the intricacies and the technical approach to this. From Morph all the way through to augmented reality and now XR, Aardman just keeps evolving. How do you think the role of voice is changing as storytelling is becoming more immersive and interactive?
Well, so the tricky thing when you have an interactive story is that you don't always know where and when a line of dialogue will be placed. So in a film or a piece of television, you know exactly the context. It gets baked in. It's sat within the context of the wider story. Many times in a more interactive story, you will have some, I don't know what you might, there's probably a term for it. I'll call it generic dialogue that gets you from A to B. It's not emotion specific. It's not part of a character arc, if you like. And those are the particularly difficult things to do, because they still need to be characterful. They still need to be engaging. They still need to be relevant, yet they might need to have 12 different meanings when you hear them. Or they might need to have no meaning at all intentionally, because you can't have, in an ideal world, in an interactive game, if you needed 12 meanings, you'd have 12 different recordings to hit those meanings. But they don't always have the data space to have that luxury. So finding those performances that are still going to be relevant is a mega challenge. And sometimes with those, you only know them once you've recorded it, put it in the experience, tested it, and gone, oh, damn it, that hasn't worked how we thought it has. And for us as an emerging media, that is often trial by fire, and you find out whether it's worked or not. And so that's rarely to do with something the performer's done right or wrong. It's usually done about our expectations of what that experiential moment was going to be, and we're taking a punt because it's new territory. But things like satellite navigation systems and all of those, they're very tricky because there's no space for turn right, turn left. Instructional things that are done, inverted commas, in a character. I think Ben Whitehead says that when we did a sat nav together, that was the most grueling, hardest couple of days of his professional career, because there's not many places you can go, because the things that give Wallace character, for example, are the little sort of nose burps and bumblings, and the things that get him into a line are some of the most interesting things from a character point of view, and you just can't have that walla and waffle.
With AI generated voices on the rise, what role do you think human performance will continue to play in animation?
I think I should say that at Aardman we treasure the human touch, and we use a lot of computer animation, but but that's also comes from a human's perspective. I think that certainly at the moment there's no evidence that AI performance is anywhere near capable of interpreting all the subtleties or the performance requirements that artists give and have. And I think that's fundamental, that it's sure you can sample something, but that doesn't give you intuition, and that doesn't give you interpretation, and that's at the heart of performance. And I think that I mean, who knows what will happen in the future, but right now there's no alternative in my mind to an actual human artist performing, because it's unique, and it's precisely everything that a computer generated AI thing isn't. And I think that's really important to hang on to.
Yeah, really lovely words to hear from you. I want to know how you keep characters like Wallace and Gromit feeling fresh and true to themselves across decades and formats. You've got from films to live shows to commercials. How do you make that happen? How do you keep them fresh?
Part of it is making sure that it's funny, and that the productions we make with them have a good story to tell. That's always at the heart of it. Their characters, as I said at the beginning, their relationship is so good and so dynamic that in itself keeps, if you stay true to that and to them as characters, and you kind of have to believe them. You have to believe that they are characters, and so that if we don't believe it, the audience is never going to believe it. So we do talk about them as if they're real. And then there's like with Wallace, he's mean to Gromit, but it's never with an agenda. It comes from a good place, and it's Gromit's loyalty that forgives Wallace. And so there's an honesty about them as well. They do crazy, stupid adventures, but there's a sort of an honesty and between them and in them that hopefully that's the thing that resonates.
I'd like to know, what's the most surprising or joyful performance you've ever heard in a booth?
Oh gosh. There's quite a lot, but on Vengeance Most Foul, with all of our sort of headline cast, so we had Ben Whitehead, we had Lauren Patel, we had Peter Kay, and we had Reece Shearsmith. All of them created moments where both Nick and I were completely unprofessional and just pissing ourselves laughing and spoilt the recording. Really? And it's those moments where you kind of just lose it, and you're sort of wrapped up in the performance yourself, and afterwards you go, oh, we're onto something here. And then and it's because we on some booths we're separate behind glass, and sometimes we're in the room, and Nick and I prefer to be in the room with the artist, not separated by a sound wall, which is great, but it has its dangers because when, like I say, when we are entertained by it, it's very hard to keep it in.
But I love that because it's human, right? And experiencing that in a booth with the director, there is nothing like it, I think. But I love those stories. I've got visions of you kind of wetting yourself in the booths now, so I'll have to get rid of those. What advice would you give to voice actors at the beginning of their careers who dream of working in animation?
Golly, keep at it. I mean, it's hugely rewarding. Find your own voice, I think, is the you don't have to be a multi-charactered voice, because sometimes your own voice, Lauren Patel, that's in our film, that as Mukherjee, that is her. She's not putting on any voice. Rhys Shearsmith, he is from up north. He did spruce up his northern accent slightly for us, but then he was gracious enough to go along with us, and we did treat his voice slightly, make it put a little bit, but the performance was integral, but we just put a bit of a boom on. And I think, don't be scared. We're all people. Try and enjoy it. They're cliches, but I think cliches are there for a reason. They're often true.
Picking up on some of the things you said there, really interesting. Many years ago, there would be perhaps more of a kind of extended caricature of a voice, and I know sometimes you do that, but also having confidence in your neutral voice and your natural voice, and learning the range within that and where you can take that, I think, is really key. Some of the things we advise newbies or new actors coming on the scene is to train, get really good support behind you, but also to collaborate, also to create your own things. If you've got a quiet period and work's not coming in, which we all experience as voice actors, buddy up with some people, create something, mess about, and enjoy that
exactly.
creative process.
Yeah, and I'd say also on top of that, don't be scared of using a voice coach. I don't think Ben would mind me saying at points in his career, he has lent on a voice coach just for him to feel more comfortable and to let himself go a bit and to find himself. It's not an admission of failure. It's finding more from yourself.
We say we worked with people to stretch you wherever you're at in your career. I want to know a little bit, if you don't mind sharing, about what all the success has meant to you. You must have an awards shelf that's heavy and bowing at home. But yeah, what does success mean to you?
Well, Nick has most of the success, I should say, historically, with Wallace and Gromit. They are. I won't lay claim to Wallace and Gromit's successes historically because they are his. But in more recent history, it's not the reason you make any of these films, but it's the most amazing cherry on top when you are acknowledged and awarded with nominations or with wins at any of these kind of big gala events. But it also helps boost the crew who work on it. Not for everybody. The whole production team gets a bit of that glow reflected back on them. It's something as the director, I'm just helping them make something amazing, and it is an amazing feeling, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but it's not the reason we do it. And but it is the biggest, fattest, chewiest cherry on top. Really, it's lovely.
I love that. We're always so proud that when Aardman comes up in conversation, when we travel round and go to various places, a real Bristol success story. Is there anything coming up that you're allowed to share, or any voices that you're looking for that you're allowed to talk about, which I guess will not be the case, but it's always worth asking?
No, I think there are lots of very exciting things, but I don't think I can mention any. No, I can't mention any of them.
Oh, I had you on the edge there. We've come up to the end of our chat. I've just got one final question for you. You've had such a long, impressive, creative career from those days when you were doing acrobatics in the middle of Bristol. What's kept you inspired and curious all these years as a creative individual?
It's not easy. That's what I like about it. When I started as an animator, I found getting the performance that needed to be up on screen, delivering the vision of the director, I found that immensely challenging. I loved it. And then when I started directing, so when you're an animator, you're focused on this minute piece of time in a bigger project and trying to get it to work. And then when I started directing more, as the challenge of animation it never went away because it's very difficult. But as it was diminishing, as I was getting better, this new door of directing opened up. And it's so difficult, and that's what I love about it. And every project is, even if it's the same intellectual property like a Wallace and Gromit or a Morph, that each project is so different and they have such unique problems, and maybe different crew members or different. It's newness, and the creative challenge is what drives me. And I think if it was ever easy, I would lose my interest.
Yeah. Merlin, it has been such a pleasure to chat to you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've had a great time, yeah.
You've been listening to High Notes. a podcast on the art and business of voice. Thanks for joining us on this episode of High Notes. Check out the episode description below for more information. And to find out more about our work at Brava and get info and tips, subscribe to our newsletter. The link is also below. Join us next time for more insights into the world of voice.